Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Books and More Talk podcast with me, your host, Rizia, where we talk about the books that build us. So I am sitting here already with my Woolworths coffee that, they so kindly made for me after I paid them for it. That's my favorite one, the vanilla cinnamon cappuccino. I'm actually quite fond of. This particular episode is focusing on a lovely little book called The Spellshop by Beth Durst. It's a charming book with a beautiful cover that makes you want to live in the house. It's like, there's a sun-dappled cottage with roses growing all over the roof, steps leading up to it with stained glass windows in the doors, and there's even a winged cat laying on the steps. I mean, a cat with wings, right? I just want to be transported into this book and make jam with Kiela. Okay, what am I talking about? The Spellshop is a book by Beth Durst, who is the author of many fantasy novels over the years, but this one is apparently her most popular title. I haven't read any of her other books, so I can't comment on that really, but I can agree that this particular one is a really lovely story. So let me read you the synopsis on the back. A faraway island, a secret spell shop, an unexpected romance. Kiela had always had trouble dealing with people, and as a librarian at the Great Library of Alyssium, she hasn't had to. She and her assistant Caz, a sentient spider plant, have spent the last 11 years sequestered among the Empire's precious spell books. But when the library goes up in flames, Kiela and Caz have to flee to the faraway island where she grew up. To Kiela's dismay, in addition to a nosy and very handsome neighbor, she finds the Empire has been draining power from the island, and Kiela is determined to make things right. But opening up her own secret spell shop comes with its own risks. The consequence of sharing magic with others is death. And as Kiela starts to make a place for herself, she realizes she must break down the walls she has kept so high. It sounds very sweet, doesn't it? So the story opens with Kiela and her sentient spider plant Caz, who is supposedly the result of a spell gone wrong, and for which the sorcerer who performed it was actually turned into wood. Geez, talk about making an example, right? So the two of them are fleeing the library, where Kiela has been almost totally isolated, like for the last 11 years, but not without grabbing as many books as they can. Yay for them. They get onto a little boat and they start sailing, but Kiela actually has no idea where they're going to go until an idea strikes her. Home. An island called Caltrey that she actually hasn't called home since she was about 6 years old, and her parents moved their family to the city in the hopes of a better life and future for Kiela. Sadly though, with the revolution, the city of Alyssium was like almost burnt down, and the thing is that Kiela's not actually sure whether she was allowed to take the books or not, but she couldn't bear to see them burn. Like, I can totally understand that. The other thing is that these books are mostly spell books, and magic isn't allowed to be in the hands of just anyone. You have to be a trained and qualified sorcerer. So she could actually get into a lot of trouble if anyone found out what she has with her. So Kiela and Caz make it to Caltrey, and she docks this little boat close to where her house is. Her parents have actually long since passed away from an illness in Alyssium, and Kiela never actually thought that she'd come home without them. So she finds the house and the stairs leading up to it completely overgrown with vines. She gets inside, all the while reassuring Caz that nothing on the island will eat him. He's adorably neurotic, right? And she feels that they can survive here. So it's like this little glimmer of hope and optimism from her. So she meets her next door neighbor, Laren, the next morning, while he's burying a sieve and staring in her doorway, which terrifies the blue off of her. Did I mention that she's blue? So thank goodness he doesn't mean any harm, and he realizes that the scythe might probably sent the wrong impression, but he came around to check who's entered the house because it's been empty for so many years. So I understand why he's there, but this is how the meeting goes. She supposed it was a reasonable explanation for why he was here. He couldn't have known she'd be asleep on a dusty old daybed. She still didn't like the way he filled the entire doorway, blocking the exit. You mean you're nosy? He smiled. The expression transformed him from ordinary into stunningly handsome. It was like the sun coming out from behind the clouds over a stormy sea. She found herself smiling back without meaning to. As soon as she realized she was doing it, she frowned. Sure, Laren said. That's one word for it. We prefer neighborly, but nosy is probably just as accurate. Still could be a murderer, she reminded herself. There was no law that said dangerous men couldn't also be handsome. And let that be a lesson to us all, ladies, right? So because Kiela has spent so much of her time alone, she's not actually fond of people. I think that's why she actually became a librarian, because she's not very social. She says that when they qualified as librarians, right, there was a party in the reading room where they all gathered and they were allowed to read anything they wanted quietly for 3 hours, and then they could take a slice of cake when they decided to leave. She says it was the best time of her life. So you can imagine what kind of person she is, right? And as a result of this, she's also got some very strict social boundaries. And there's nothing wrong with this, right? Like, some people have stricter boundaries with other people, and that's fine. But she does seem to have like some kind of internal conflict about it, especially with Laren. And she was hoping, though, that she wouldn't have to meet or interact with anyone on the island. But she soon realizes how silly that was. So it goes like this. Looking at what they had and didn't have, Kiela didn't see any way around it. It was foolish to think she could build a life here just from what they found and what they bought. Besides, the fantasy of living here unnoticed had already been broken when their neighbor had discovered her sleeping. Nope, there was no denying it. She was going to have to talk to people. This made me laugh, right? Because sometimes I feel the same way, like especially when I go into an environment that I don't know, where there's people that I don't know, because now you have to connect with them and you have to find like common topics that you can chat about, and it's like it can be very stressful. But anyway, so Kiela and Caz clean up the house. And then, of course, they need food, and for that she will have to make a trip into the village. So how lovely then, when she opens her front door, she finds a basket of goodies left by the sweet Laren: eggs, cheese, and cinnamon buns. I mean, geez, I wish I had neighbors like that. Once she has a full stomach, she then sets off into the village, and she gets more than she bargains for, though, when she enters a bakery, and she finds like lots of villagers there, most of whom knew her parents. So the baker saves her from the crowd, but then she proves to be just as talkative. So Kiela has some trouble with that, but she realizes that the baker is just trying to be friendly and put her at ease. And it also helps that she makes delicious cinnamon buns. So I think you can forgive a person a lot if they make delicious cinnamon buns, and if they're going to give you some of them for free. So something that Bryn the baker tells her is that the island has been suffering over the last few years because the new regime has withdrawn sorcerers who used to come around and keep the island's magic in balance. So this was especially important for the tides, the soil, and the water. So the fruits and vegetables haven't been growing, and the fishing hasn't been great, and the islanders are actually really suffering. So Laren, who she finds out is a mer horse herder, yeah, mer horses, right, tells her that the size of the herd has been dwindling, and as a result, the fishing hasn't been good. So it turns out that the mer horses help the fisher people catch fish. So Laren keeps showing up unannounced at Kiela's house, and this doesn't go over well with her. So he's trying to be helpful. He comes over and he fixes the stove and the chimney, and then he cooks for her, and then another time he comes over to fix the roof tiles. And this is when she gets annoyed, and she tells him that she hasn't actually asked for his help. He shouldn't just assume that he can come over, and he gets a little awkward, right? So I felt bad for him because he was trying to be nice, but I also understand where she's coming from. She doesn't know him very well, and he could be a murderer, right? And then she finds out, though, that he knew her when she was young. She didn't remember him, but he remembered her. And he tells her that her family was kind to him when no one else was. So she figures that he's being nice, as an attempt to repay her for the kindness. Kiela. I think, the isolation in the library has also, affected her ability to understand, social cues and obviously, body language and inflections in other people. So she just doesn't feel that he could be nice just for the sake of being nice. But anyway, now that she knows that the challenges that the island is facing, she wonders if she could use her spell books to find some spells that could help them. So she tries one out on her tomato plants at home, and it works amazingly. She's now lousy with tomatoes. So she decides to try it on a berry bramble, and again it works so well. She now has a lifetime supply of raspberries. So she decides that she's going to open up a jam shop because of her lifetime supply of raspberries. And in addition to jam, she's going to sell remedies that the villagers can use to help them with their plants and other things also to improve their quality of life, which I thought was really sweet. So even though Kiela is not a very social person, she's a very caring person and she wants to help. So she decides on the jam because she noticed that none of Bryn's pastries had jam on them. So she figures there's a gap in the market, right? Smart. She finds her mother's old jam recipe in one of the kitchen drawers, and she finds that the jam making process is actually quite an emotional one for her. So I'm not really one to associate food with emotions, but who knows, it might happen one day. I'm like the person who can associate like different periods of my life with the books that I was reading at that point. But Kiela says that eating the jam tastes like a memory, which is really just beautiful. It's very nostalgic, and you really get that sense from this book. So she says that she makes jam because jam makes people happy. You couldn't eat jam and be sad. It was fundamentally impossible. Besides, it reminded her of tea with her parents, and it was a good memory. The three of them around the hearth in their tiny apartment in Alyssium, her mother reading aloud from a book, her father making comments that would make her laugh, and all of them having tea with jam on slightly stale bread that her parents had bought in the market in exchange for a bit of her father's work with mending nets. It was a taste that came with near-forgotten emotions. So the jam shop is decided. She also realizes that she will need to interact with customers when they come to the house to buy the jam, but she makes her peace with it. As for the remedies, which are really spells, but we're rebranding, she and Caz catalog all the books that they save from the library, and they're pleased to find that they've actually got quite a variety of spells. And they look through them and they're trying to find like simple ones that could actually help the villagers. So she asks Laren to help her set up some shelves. She asks him this time, so he is welcome to come in, right? And so it begins. She's really scared that somebody is going to find out about the books and they'll get in trouble. But Kiela decides that it's worth the risk. But she really goes like to lengths to make sure that the books are hidden. And to get the remedies right, she starts experimenting first with a tree healing spell. And she finds a way like to keep the seed and spell like innocuous until the seed is planted, and then the spell takes effect. And it's actually very effective. But she struggles with hiding the fact that it's magic. And I have a feeling that the people kind of know. So one time when she's experimenting, she creates this little cactus plant in the garden, and that's not really what was supposed to happen. The next day, the cactus is running around, and it's like the cutest thing ever. It eventually starts understanding what they're saying, and it rushes around saying meep, meep, meep. So that's what they call them, meep. The problem is that many of her experimental spells have had unintended consequences, like they turned an apple tree into a bird, and then another one that caused a tree to start singing. And there's a villager who has a hunch that it's actually Kiela causing all the changes, because he notices that things are starting to change after she's arrived. And eventually the creatures in the area though start noticing what she's doing, and they come to her for help. So this is a fantasy book, right? It's not like over the top fantasy, but there are like some fantastical creatures in here. So she and Caz wake up one morning to find their garden full of forest spirits. In every direction she looked in the garden, there were, oh my goodness, was that a bear? Or not a bear exactly, because it wasn't made of flesh and fur. It was the idea of a bear shaped from a cloud. Vast as a boulder, but as insubstantial as mist, it hovered a foot off the ground above the daisies. So imagine like opening your front door in the morning and seeing these things like in your garden. It's like, I don't know if you've had your coffee yet, but wow. So there are a lot of them, right? And they come to Kiela and Caz for help because there are a lot of trees in the forest that are struggling because of the withdrawal of magic from the island. So Kiela and Caz follow them, Caz whispering like dire warnings to her all the while, none of which Kiela heeds. And she manages to help the bears, and they're very grateful to her. So the next morning, Kiela and Caz find a whole lot of remedy ingredients in their garden that the forest spirits left for them. And I think that this particular chapter was like the most magical, dreamiest chapter of the whole book. And she's really learning a lot being on the island, and she worries, heaven forbid, that she's becoming an extrovert. But then one day, a terrible thing happens, right? There's a storm. It's a magic storm, and it happens apparently because of the imbalance of the magic on the island. So Kiela is caught in the storm because even though an alarm goes off, she doesn't actually know what the alarm is for. So she runs up to Laren's place to take refuge, and then she starts to realize that she actually likes him. He's a very nice guy. And she notices that he's nice just for the sake of being nice. And that's quite something, right? Because I don't think that you find a lot of people like that. And while they're watching the storm through a gap in the boarded up windows, they see a boat in the sea. and it's really struggling with the waves, right? And in fact, they actually see it like disappear at one point, but then they see it again, and then Laren says that he has to go out and help. So he runs out into the storm, like despite Kiela's protests, and he mounts his mer horse, who takes him out to the boat. And then thank goodness they come back safely. So after the storm, though, Kiela finds that Caz has been housing a mermaid and her mer baby, who was taken seriously ill during the storm. So the mermaid came to Kiela and Caz for help with her baby because, she's obviously seen that she helped the forest spirits, and she's trying to improve things on the island. But she's pretty hesitant, though, because of, the seriousness of the issue. But she's determined to find a spell that can help the little one. So she manages to find something, and phew, they save the mer baby, thank goodness. Then another tragedy. Laren's mer horse is taken ill with the same illness as the mer baby, and Kiela hopes that the same spell will work. And yay, it does. Phew, some tense reading there though. But this is a book where everything works out. It's like, nothing like really, really terrible is going to happen, and you just know. So after some care, the woman that Laren saved has recovered, and Kiela finds out that the woman is named Redane, and she's actually from Alyssium. She tells the villagers that she fled the city because of all the trouble with the city being ransacked and the emperor being overthrown. Kiela actually didn't tell them any of this. She found it very difficult to talk about it. She was pretty traumatized. So they don't know what was happening in Alyssium. And Kiela is pretty scared though, because this woman, Redane, saw her helping the mer horse, and she was pretty sure that Redane recognized it as magic, and she's worried that Redane is going to report her. And, during her time on the island, Kiela has been developing close bonds with its inhabitants. This is something that she never thought she'd need or she'd want to do. But she finds herself liking them more and more. And with each passing day, she finds herself really wanting to stay there. So this makes her even more nervous while Redane is around, because if Redane finds out that she has the spell books with her, she will have to leave to keep the others safe, especially Laren. And it's a good thing that she realized this, because Redane does actually announce herself to the town as an imperial investigator who is there to find the person who is conducting the illegal spells. And of course, Kiela freaks out. What's worse, there's an old man named Fennerer in the town who actually rats her out. He's so awful. At some point, I really just wanted to smack him and be like, dude, just keep quiet. What is wrong with you? She's making things better, And he just doesn't seem to appreciate it in the same way that the others do. Anyway, you'll always get that one guy. So Kiela had actually restored the water fountain in town. And this is just another thing that he'd noticed. And this was the issue also that triggered Redane to start investigating. But then things get complicated, because Redane tells them that, I'm not actually an imperial investigator. In fact, I'm actually heir to the throne that the current rulers are looking for, and they want to execute her. She's 16th in line to the throne, by the way, right? So these guys are very thorough. Laren called it though, hey, when Redane was throwing her imperial investigator weight around. He told her that he's only seen mer horses being that aggressive when they're afraid, and that's exactly what she was. So good for you, Laren. Redane is terrified that she's going to be found and executed. She says that there's one faction that wants to kill her and another faction that wants to crown her. And she doesn't want either of those outcomes. So they try to come up with a plan so that if any of the imperial soldiers arrive on the island, they'll be able to hide her. So Bryn the baker agrees to give her a job at the bakery, and if anyone asks, they can say that she's been working there for years, and no one new has arrived on the island for a long time. So just after they agree on the plan, though, imperial soldiers arrive at the island, and before they dock, Redane actually says that she recognizes one of them as the man that she was supposed to marry. Yikes. She didn't want to marry him though, but the problem is that he would recognize her. So they would have to find a better way to hide her. So Kiela has this idea to call on the forest spirits to help them, because she remembers tales of people being taken by them and kind of just disappearing. But that's more concerning than it is hopeful, which is what Caz points out. But Kiela feels that it's worth a try because they don't really have any other options. So they go to the forest and she calls on the spirits to help, and they do. They actually pull Redane into a tree, not into the hollow of the trunk, but the way I understood it is she became a part of the tree itself, and she was to stay there until they could get rid of the imperial soldiers. So with some like somewhat clever, not so subtle lying, Kiela manages to get them to leave. And while she's talking to him, she realizes that the captain of the soldiers doesn't actually want to find Redain. He seems to like her and he doesn't want her executed. So remember, this is the one that she was supposed to marry. So he moves off with his soldiers, allowing Kiela to go and get Redain out of the tree. But as the soldiers are leaving, another magical storm is brewing and Kiela is worried that they won't make it through. And Redain is like, what? Are you mad? What if they want to kill me? But Laren has had like quite the influence on Kiela with his kindness. And she says that they have to do what is right and let other people make their own decisions, which in this case is not altogether comforting because the potential outcome is that Redain could be executed. But I understand what Kiela is saying is that you do what's right and you behave in a kind way and you hope that your kindness will influence other people to also be kind, right? And Kiela has faith in the captain that he wants what's best for Redain because of his previous behavior, right? But to stop the storm, they actually have to do some wind magic, and that requires many sorcerers to perform. So Kiela calls upon the charmingly named Pinecone Coven or Society in public, made up of friends that she's made in the village who have helped her make the tree remedies. So the coven are quick to come to their aid even in the midst of the raging storm, and they say the spell together and yay, the storm goes away. So in the sea they can see the Imperial ship that was struggling in the water, but they're fine. So the captain comes to the shore and after a moment he looks at Kiela and then he tells his soldiers that luckily, there was a traveling sorcerer who came through and helped calm the storm. So he tells Kiela that Redain has always wanted something different out of her life, and it seems that he is going to leave her be. Yay! So you see, like I said, everything like this kind of works out in this book. So if you want something to make you feel good, this is that book. So there's a beautiful epilogue at the end also, but I'm not gonna give that away for you. And this was just a feel-good book, right? Everything goes right. The characters are so nice. And yeah, some of them do have like a little bit of a sad backstory, but they all rise above and they do something good with their lives. So the author actually said that she wanted to write a book that felt like drinking hot chocolate. And I think that she's achieved exactly that. It's the kind of book, that it's a cozy book. It makes you like want to read it on a rainy day while you're like snuggled in the blanket, drinking your coffee or your hot chocolate. And like, it just gives you all like those snuggly feelings, because like, it's about found family, right? Kiela arrived on the island hoping that she wouldn't have to leave the cottage or talk to people, but she made so many friends and she actually even fell in love. And she was constantly fascinated at how much the people seemed to care about her. So, it's found family, it's community, it's about being kind, about helping people just for the sake of helping. And this author has written like many books for varying age groups, and this is her first foray into what is called cozy fantasy. I'm telling you, there's like a word for everything, right? So the book is rated 4.07 on Goodreads, and I gave it a 4-star rating as well. I usually only give 5 stars if I feel I can read the book again. So even though I enjoyed this one, I can't see myself reading it again. To be perfectly honest, there were like some times when I had to like really convince myself to pick the book up and carry on reading it because it's pretty slow. So it's this cozy fantasy novel. Nothing huge happens, it's not like a heavy action book. It's very, very calm. It's very serene. Everybody is nice. Things work out all the time. So sometimes I had to like really push myself to pick it up. And even though it's not a very long book, like 384 pages, it took me a little bit longer to finish than I thought it would, right? So this book actually also won the Goodreads Choice Awards for Romantasy in 2024. I hate that word romantasy, by the way, but that's like a conversation for another day. So again, the cover of this book is just beautiful. It's really eye-catching, and it's actually what made me pick it up at the store. So if you have read this book or you would like to read it, please let me know what you think on my socials. You can find me at Books and Mortar on TikTok or Raz the Reader on Instagram, or you can email me at booksandmortar2024@gmail.com. The podcast, you can find it on iono.fm. It's on Spotify, on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, on Audible, all of the major platforms. If you Google Books and Mortar, you'll also come across my Buzzsprout website where you'll also find all of the episodes available. You can also then just copy the RSS code and like plug it into any podcast program that you use, and it will automatically find the podcast for you. So I'd really love to hear from you. Please leave me a comment. Please give me a rating, a review. Subscribe to the channels if you feel like it. And until next time, this is Books and Mortar with me, your host, Rizia, where we talk about the books that build us.